Hi and welcome to Lois and Morgana Davidson Art. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas or whichever midwinter festival you celebrate, or even if you don't celebrate at all, I hope you had a relaxing and restful time. Today I'm going to be painting this mountain scene, and I'm going to be trying to create this texture here for the mountains without using a brush to start with and using a fairly abstract sort of style of painting. I'll be using a limited palette as usual, and to start with I will be applying the paint using a flexible plastic store card. It's used a little bit like a trowel or a palette knife to scrape the paint across the page and create lovely textures on the bumpy texture of the cold press paper. Here you can see the little blobs of paint that I've squeezed out freshly from my tube, and it's indigo, burnt sienna, Payne's grey and sepia. But use any colours that you're drawn to, and for me it doesn't matter which order I put them onto the card because I want fairly random effects to happen. I want watercolour to have its way and to just give me some unexpected effects, because I'll be painting wet in wet, which will mean I'll be wetting my page mostly all over but leaving a few dry patches so I get some soft edges where the paint mixes onto the wet surface, and harder edges where it meets dry paper. I've prepared for this by looking at lots of beautiful mountain photographs and scenes, and so I've got those fresh in my mind when I come to create these mountains. I'll be working wet in wet onto Milford brand paper. It's 100% cotton. It's cold pressed, so it's got a nice texture, and it's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about 20 degrees. I shall use a water spray once I've applied the paint to move the paint around, and I'll tip and tilt the page as and when I think it needs it, just to create these beautiful effects. You can see dragging the paint across the page, and now I'll start to adjust the marks that I've created with the card with my brushes. So it's not entirely painted without a brush. I use my brushes. I also use a palette knife, but the first most important paint application was done with the card. You can see how the sky wash is running in the direction that I have turned my painting, and that helps me to get this lovely smooth sky. And then adjusting the crest of the mountain with my brushes helps me to integrate sky and mountain top. So now I'm going to turn my painting round and lay it flat, and I shall work into it a bit more and add some foreground. I'll spray the foreground lightly first and then use what's the paint that's left on my flexible card and scrape it again over the texture of the paper, allowing the really thick paint to be transferred and applied onto the page. Then I'll work into that with my brushes and my palette knife, also tipping and tilting the board and spraying if needed. So with some delicate brushwork using my new reservoir brush that I got for Christmas and a few other brushes, and of course the palette knife, just to scrape through some lighter areas and some texture, I feel that I've integrated the foreground part or crest of the mountain, this ridge, just sort of rubbing that paint in a little bit with my finger, just smudging it a bit. I feel like that crest is now integrated with the rest, so now I shall leave it all to dry and come back and see how it looks. So here's the dry painting, and I'm quite pleased with it. I've got a few water drops made their way into the sky, probably when I was spraying the foreground, but I don't mind. It just gives a little bit of something and nothing, maybe the hint of some birds at the top of the mountain, something like that. And don't be worried if anything like that happens when you're painting. It's all part of the process, and this is after all just an experiment. We're not trying to create a finished painting. So removing the tape, I can get to see it with fresh eyes. As soon as I see it with that clean white border, the painting looks more finished. It looks the way that it's intended to look, and I can see if it needs anything doing to it. And I think I need a lot more dark across the bottom to balance up the tonal values and the composition, so that this foreground ridge is in shadow across the bottom. So I've just mixed up a really nice dark with all my colours, but going a bit heavy on the Payne's grey, and just carefully working around the marks that I have in my ridge, so I don't destroy those marks, but just add emphasis to them with these darker tonal values. I'm using a flat brush because it's a really nice shape for getting into these awkward areas, but still keeping a nice good sized brush stroke. And then I shall scrape into the paint with my palette knife just to sort of soften up that texture a little bit once I've got enough of that shadow sort of to balance up the dark of the sky up in the opposite corner, if you see what I mean, and the dark crest above. So I'm much happier with that, maybe just a little bit of texture. Following the existing directionality of the marks that were created when I scraped the paint on with the card. And just trying to sort of keep that texture, just enhancing it a little bit. And I'm quite pleased with the textures here. I'm pleased with the amount of detail or suggested detail in the foreground ridge, and the texture across the mountain, the shadows, that pop of red in the foreground, I think works nicely to draw the eye into the painting. And I like the ominous sort of graduated wash for the sky. So here's the finished painting, taken in slightly better light. And I hope you found that helpful, and I hope maybe you'll experiment with trying to find your own way of creating texture. Don't just try a plastic card, try a palette knife, maybe try a small trowel, anything that you can think of to apply the paint and to create slightly different marks or textures than you would get with brushes can help to make your work really unique and help you to find some really beautiful effects that you can use in your paintings. Well, thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. And if you'd like to support the channel, then please follow the links below. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.